Pro podcast, where we teach you everything about rugby and rugby league. We also deep dive in strength and conditioning, nutrition and recovery, and mindset. This podcast is an all-in-one stop to get you reaching your full potential. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the first ever Rugby Pro Academy podcast. I'm your host, Luke Rooney, here in sunny Melbourne, Australia. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. If you don't know who we are called Rugby Pro Academy. We deep dive in everything rugby and rugby league. We also get into strength and conditioning, how to get bigger, faster, and stronger to improve your match. And we also touch on nutrition and recovery, because without those things, you're just not going to reach your full potential. Thanks for joining us. This is my first podcast gig, so we're going to see how we go. You know what? We can only get better from here on in. Make sure you subscribe, because the more subscribers we have, the more time we can put into these podcasts. We can get. We're going to get some plays on. We're going to get some past players, some coaches. So if you have any questions or any subjects or people you want us to interview, definitely send us an email or write to us, or DMs in our Instagram or TikTok, and I'm sure we'll definitely get back to you, and hopefully we can touch on the subjects that you want. It's kind of these podcasts. We're thinking, how can we get these up and running, and how are we going to actually implement these? And I was thinking, we don't want these long podcasts go on for hour 15. You're just like, it just takes too much time. I just wanted, these podcasts are really about just having little snippets here and there, a 10-15-minute chat about a certain topic. It could be about, mindset skills. It could be about strength and conditioning, maybe some speed things. We can talk about, rugby IQ, or you getting better at rugby. But the main thing we wanted to get in, we're going to talk about a subject, and then you can go implement that in that training on that day, or on the weekend. You can think about, the things we talked about here. You can go put that in that game, and hopefully, I'm definitely 100% sure if you implement this into your training, into your game, you're going to become 100% better. But thanks for joining us. The first one was kind of the hardest one I was thinking about, because you can start with all these different kind of things. And I was thinking, we maybe should do something about rugby. And I'm like, yeah, we could do things about that. And then someone said we should do something about speed, because everyone wants to do speed. And we'll do that. But for the first one, I was just thinking the best thing probably one of the most important things, because everyone wants programs these days. They want a good, the rugby coaching program. They want a good program here. They want a good program in the strength and conditioning. They want a good strength program. They want a good speed program. But if you don't implement that 100%, it doesn't matter how good the program is. If you can have a mediocre, program, no matter what is strength or rugby program. But if you're going 100% in that program, you're going to get a lot out of it. Where you can have the best program, it can look so good going into it, but if you only commit to that 50%, it's not going to be that good. So this podcast is all about being a sponge, and I'll get to what is a sponge. You all know what a sponge is, but how it relates to rugby. And this kind of happened to me a long time ago. My first preseason, I got called up to do my first preseason with the Penrith Panthers. I'm from Penrith. My first NRL preseason. I didn't play a game yet, and my dreams was to play for Penrith. And I was thinking, going into there, we're all going to do the same training, and I'm up against these really high class players. Some of them played for the country, played 150 games for Penrith, and played for the state. And it was quite daunting. I was enthusiastic, and I was really eager to rip in, but it was quite daunting. And I thought to myself, how am I going to beat these guys into these positions if I want to make an NRL team? Because it's going to become a time where I'm going to have to really hit my straps and make this team. And I was thinking, well, how about I just look at the guys who have been playing, 5-6 years in NRL, who's been playing for their country, playing for the state, and I'll really have a look at them and try and learn from them. And there's a big difference between the very best and the kind of, wouldn't say average, because playing NRL and playing professional rugby or rugby league is very tough to do, and you have to be really on your game anyway. But there's still even a level between the two people. And what I found, looking at the people who I admired, who were playing for their country and that, and who were at the top of the game, is every drill that they did, it didn't matter. It was a rugby drill, it could have been a warm up, it could have been in the gym, it could have been recovery session. what they did is they were like a sponge. So they soaked everything out they could out of that drill or that training session as much as they could. So, if it was a warm up, they'll do their warm ups perfectly. They'll try and get good range of motion before they get in. And then if it was a skills session, it might be only 20%, intensity, but they would go into there and they would think, okay, I'm gonna get everything. I'm gonna suck everything I can out of this session. And you know what? They would put their hands up towards the ball. They'd try to catch it as crisply as they could. They'd pass through the body onto the next person, trying to get the best pass possible. And a big bell kind of rang off in my mind. I think, well, that's what I've got to do. I've just got to be on 100% into getting everything I can out of that drill. And I remember watching a guy called Ryan Girdler if you're not a rugby league fan, you might have heard of him anyway. I think he scored the most points in New South Wales or in State of Origin history. But he was unbelievable. And I used to watch him, and he just really concentrated everything he can do to the best of his ability. And I was thinking what made him so good is he didn't just think, oh, this is, I've played this level, I've done this before, this is just an easy skills drill. No, he went in there and he got everything he could out of that drill. He sucked up everything he could. He caught it crisply. You could tell he was really thinking about what he was doing. And even though it was in a slow pace setting, he would just get everything out of it he could. He still had fun, but when just before the drill would happen, he would be definitely onto it. And then you'd go into the main session. It would be exactly the same. You'd go into recovery. He would do his recovery to the best of his ability. He didn't take any shortcuts, and it didn't matter if he was tired. He'd still show up. He would do his work. And I think that's what makes a really good player. And if you want to reach that next level, no matter where you are, you can be, a 13, 14-year-old, you just want to make that under 16 side, or you want to make it under 18 side, or your school side, or you want to go pro and play for your country. You've got to just take control of every opportunity you have. And it's you probably heard the 1%ers, but it's so true. You've just got to suck everything you can out of every drill. And that's how you get better, because these things are it's like a snowball effect. Imagine if you're just going 100% and you're really concentrating on every drill for the whole week. And then that turns into 2 weeks, and then a month, 6 months, 12 months from there. You're going to be a total different player than the people who are just going, 80%, 70%. Sometimes they might go 100% when they're really feeling like it, but usually they're about 80, 70%. You're going to be a 10 times better player. And that's what I kind of wanted to touch on this podcast first, is be that sponge, be a player who's a sponge and gets everything out of the session. I've been to a lot of amateur clubs, especially lately, and you can really tell the difference. They kind of, when they go into drills, even especially skill drills, where it's not 100%, you're just trying to get that mind working, you're trying to get the hands up, trying to pass, or it can even be a 20%, tackling drill, that people are kind of just going through the motions, and you just don't get better. And you see these amateurs, I go through the motions, and they might, even if they're 16, 17, they'll have, they'll be full on into it. And then for some reason, they kind of think, oh, no, I'm too good for this. It's not really going to benefit me. And you'll see them another 3 or 4 years later down the track, and they just haven't grown. They've actually probably gone backwards. So if you want to be really good, if you want to make the team that you want, if you want to become definitely professional, you have to do this, is just soak everything you can up of every session. And that's, as I said, the drills, the passing from one to the side to the other. If we're just thinking about getting your tackles right, really think, how am I going to get this? How can I get this crisp? This tackle as crisp as possible, getting good position, good technique. And then when it is 100%, you are going absolutely flat chat as well. And you'll be surprised how quick that skill gets into you, and you're on autopilot, and it comes naturally. Don't be one of these players who think, no, this isn't really going to benefit me. I've done these for years and years. That's how good players become great players. And I think I heard LeBron James say the same thing. He does the same thing over and over and over again. He never gets bored of the drill. He just keeps going, because you know what? That's what it takes. And you will find, if you keep doing it over and over again, you'll flourish on the field. And that's where you go places in your career. So It doesn't matter if it's rugby training. It could be a conditioning session. You've got to always ask yourself before you get in that field, am I putting 100% in? Am I being that sponge? If you got 10, let's say it's a conditioning session in preseason, you got 10 200s and you go hard for the last two runs, you go as hard as you can, and they were faster than the first two. It's like, well, you got to ask yourself what happened to the other eight. A good player who's actually getting everything out of themselves is going to go hard from number one, and they're just going to keep going and going and going. You don't want to be that person, or you don't want to be that person who's missing reps. You never miss a rep. Even if you're doing the rep, you're not doing it 100%. Don't be that person, because you're just going to go backwards. And you know what? There's going to be a person who you're going to play against this season. It could be in 2 weeks, in a month. You will get shown up. If someone's putting the hard work and they're a sponge and they're getting everything out of their training, they will pass you in the rugby field. And that's what I love about rugby. You always got to keep at the top of your game. You're going to have to keep doing those drills that you're not really keen on. The days when you don't feel like doing it, always be that sponge. Come ready to learn and come ready to give it your all. I'm not saying you don't have fun, because you can have fun, and without fun, you're not going to really play good anyway. So I'm saying just before the drill or just before the session, you can have a chat and have a laugh, but just before you get into that session or the drill, switch on. Am I going to get this as much as I can out of this drill? Yes. And then boom, you're switched on and you go as hard as you can. And that's just the same in the gym. In the gym, don't miss any reps. If you're pushing, push up hard as you can. Don't go half-hearted, unless the strength and conditioning guy says you can go quite half-hearted. Depends on the session. But you're still thinking about technique. You're thinking about how can I be better at these exercises, which is going to benefit me onto the field. And another thing, being a sponge, I find helps, is if you're a inconsistent player or inconsistent trainer, usually it's why the reason why you're like that is because you're not a sponge and you're not taking everything out of every drill. You watch people flourish, people, especially if you're a person who has 1-2 good games and then you fall off the face of the earth for the next two, because you just can't keep that momentum up. You can't keep that consistency up. If you start putting this consistency of being a sponge, going 100% in every drill you do, you watch your consistency, and it will just be, you'll be up on the top of your game all the time. You're never going to be at the top of your game, but you're not going to go from 100% to 60, 50, 40%. I've even seen people, stay around about 80, 90 mark, and you'll be doing that for the full season. So take this on board, guys, because this is an absolute game changer. And no matter what we talk about in the upcoming podcast, it could be about drills, it can be anything. If you're not being a sponge and you're not going 100% in these drills, you're just not going to get anything out of it. So really check yourself, guys. Play these podcasts before you go to training. Maybe you're at school, you can put it on your iPhones, you're at work, put it on, but make sure you implement these things and have a think, guys. Are you being a sponge, or is there places in your training and in the game where you can definitely put a lot more effort and you can be a sponge and take as much out of that drill or the game as you can? That's going to do us for today, guys. As I said, they're nice and short and sweet. I don't want to hold you up for too long. I hope you learned something. Definitely check yourself before our next podcast, and hopefully in a week you'll be already thinking, I'm going to be a sponge this week, and you're going to do it from week on end, and you're going to become an absolutely unbelievable player. Thanks again, guys. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Luke here. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you next one for the podcast too. Have a good one, guys.